Welcome to Become a Successful Podcaster with Bruce Chamoff, where we help you be successful with your podcast and everything from audience growth to monetization, marketing, branding, and so much more. Rate us on Apple. Today, I have Brent Dowlan. Did I say your name right, Brent?
You did. You did better than I do.
All right. Brent Dowlan from the Fallable Man podcast. He's been on the World Podcast Network for 2.5 years, and we've been talking back and forth. We finally met just last week when I was a guest on his podcast, and I said, "Come on mine," and here he is. So, Brent, how you doing?
Oh, I'm excellent, Bruce. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you because I am a big fan of your podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but when you have a website of over 1,200, you can't listen to all of them. You try, and some people just stand out as podcasters and some don't, and you're one of them that do.
Well, thank you very much. That's high praise from you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I appreciate that. And I loved being on your show last week. I have to say, you are one of the most popular. Sorry, let me try that again. You're one of the most positive podcasters I've ever heard. Your subjects, your topic, your episode titles are always positive and uplifting. And that's a big thing. Um, for those people who are listening, this podcast, Fallible Man, if you are especially a man, obviously this is pretty good if you're a woman too, but it's geared more towards the gender of male. And what Brent does, Brent covers everything from fatherhood to adulthood to just being a parent in general, and a husband. And he always makes that very clear. So every episode is positive. But I will tell you, Brent, I have my favorite episodes. And I
Yeah.
because remember that a heading, whether it's an episode title or it's just a newspaper, if anybody reads that anymore, are it gives you get 3 seconds to grab somebody's attention. So you have to literally write it in such a way where it grabs their attention. And if it doesn't, then their eyes just move right off. And a lot of yours do grab my attention. Of course, I believe that what grabs your attention is what resonates with you personally as a person. Everybody has different things that resonate with them, So with me, actually, let me come back to your. I'm going to look at your podcast on Apple again. I'm going to tell you what my favorite ones are. And first of all, the latest one, Stop Thinking, Start Doing, and a Man's Guide to Overcoming Procrastination. I'm always about overcoming procrastination, and I have a lot to talk to you about that. And also, you came out with, where is it? November 26th, The Power of Thank You, Cultivating Gratitude. I always hear about gratitude and how it makes you feel better, so I listen to that one. Although I do have to say that guy was a little bit weird. That guy, he was like, I mean, I don't even know his name. I'm looking at the description right now. Um,
David.
David, he was interesting to listen to, but he was a little bit on the abrasive side. I was like, I, I, I mean, I don't want to insult anybody, and I really hope he doesn't hear this, but, but he doesn't sound like the type of guy that should be talking about gratitude. I don't know.
David. David's an interesting character because he's a good friend of mine actually,
Okay.
and we work together. I freelance for his company,
Ah,
and he's also a podcaster. He's the host of the Remarkable People podcast.
I want to get him on.
Um,
I get him on the show. And
but David
yeah,
is very he's a devout Christian, and faith is at the center of everything he
I heard.
does.
Yeah.
But he is very it's like uh, unapologetic in a good way. He wants to. It's like, no, this is who I am and what I believe in.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. I I love the his dedication to God. I heard all his references, which is great, and I respect anybody that does. No, it's amazing. And also the November 19th, he came out with Embracing the Struggle, the Art of Long-Term Goal Achievement. I don't have to tell you, that's one of my things. right? And the podcast network is one of them. Music is another one, and but I do want to say to anybody, I mean, to just anybody who just wants to get a positive uplifting podcast, definitely check out Brent's podcast. He's a great guy. I was on his show. You bring out the best of everybody that you interview.
Well, thank you very much. I try. I love. I love. I kind of fell into podcasting by accident and fell in love with it instantly.
Tell
And
me
so
about that.
I get excited about it. Every show I get excited for. I actually started writing a book. I had several people pushing me to write a book. I used to, a little context, we used to have a lot of friends come over once a
Mhm.
week for a big, like, family dinner kind of thing with about 14 to 20 people.
Wow.
And I had all these women in my house, friends of my wife, who they had boyfriends or they had husbands. They were different spots in their relationships. And they'd be complaining about what their boyfriend or husband was doing. And I would translate what that actually meant for them because I knew they didn't get what was going on. And so, like, you should write a book. You should write a book. And so I actually started to write a book, and I was like, I don't. Before the term mansplaining became popular, I was like, I'm not about to write a book mansplaining men to women. I'm not going to tell that that's a death sentence waiting to happen.
Oh yeah,
And so instead, I started writing a book focused on helping men step into the best version of themselves.
that's cool.
And then I looked into self publishing and was like, oh, I have to have an audience. Otherwise, like my wife and my mom are going to read this. And so I jumped onto social media because, like, at the time, it was like everybody just gets insta famous, right? Insta famous. After about 2 weeks on social media, I figured out I hate social media. Like, it's a horrible medium for me. And so I really started thinking, like, well, what's a medium that plays with my strengths? And I've been doing public speaking since I was 11 years old. I grew up a preacher's kid. And so talking is the most natural thing in the world to me. I've been speaking in front of mid to large audiences my whole life.
Nice.
Learning to talk facing a camera, not to another person directly, because I started as a solo podcast. That was really rough. The first several episodes, I leave them up to my YouTube so people can find them. Like, I'm very robotic and I'm like stiff and I don't want to move. And
Interesting.
uh, I actually ended up putting a picture of my friend's face around my camera lens so I could pretend I was talking to somebody. But
That's
I
interesting.
absolutely just fell in love with the platform and our platform, venue, whatever you want to say, podcasting. And then I started doing interview episodes and I got to do it with other people, which took the whole camera issue out. And it's like, I love this. I love having a platform where I can talk to people because my best qualities, like when it comes to talking to other people, come to a face to face. Like one on one, working with people directly one on one is where I really shine as any kind of coach. So for me, this is a very intimate connection when I connect
Yeah,
with my audience.
that's good.
So
Yeah, that's very interesting because I also like public speaking, and I have no problem with that. Most people hate public speaking, but you have that elite group that love to get in front of an audience. I'm a ham. I don't care. I'm a singer in the band. I'm a musician. So when you get in front of people like that, public speaking isn't such a big deal, right? And there are other people that just hate it, but you love podcasting. And you have 340 episodes right now, which I'm looking, yeah, right, 340. That's excellent. And what was the biggest audience you ever spoke in front of when you did public speaking?
um, I want to say I spoke, I performed and spoke at a conference with a drama group that I was running at the time at a conference in the greater St. Louis area. There was about two and a half, 3,000 people in the audience.
I was on mute for a second. Um, wow, would you say 2 to 3,000?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Where in St. Louis was that?
Um, can't tell you precisely. It was one of the smaller. It was one of the suburbs. St. Louis has it's just surrounded by suburbs that it's been pulled in. I think it was in the Hillsborough area.
Okay. Because I think it was 2017. I spoke at Washington University, which is in St. Louis.
Hmm.
So, and I was only in the city that day. I love St. Louis. And I was only there, not that day, I'm sorry. I was there like that weekend. And I did all the sites. The Gateway Arch was closed, unfortunately. I couldn't do that, but
Oh,
went to the bottom of it. But I did everything else. And I'll tell you an interesting story. So when I did my presentation, there was this guy who loved my presentation and he wanted me to head his company. And
wow.
he talked up a big storm, put it that way. And I met him that night. We were in the, was it the Del Mar Loop? Is that what that is? I think, or is that,
Think
I get that
so.
confused with Washington, D.C. But yeah, the Del Mar Loop, which is kind of like the party area of St. Louis. And we hang out. His name was John. He's like, I'm going to take you here. I live in St. Louis. I'm going to take you here. Oh, you're from New York. That's cool. You never been to St. Louis? Great. I'll show you around. So he shows me around. We go to that night, I think Chuck Berry died. So we went to Blueberry Hill, the club right there, and we had a good time there. He showed me around St. Louis, and he says, I want to take you to breakfast the next day, and I really want you to head my company. I was excited.
Well,
So,
yeah.
yeah, we go to breakfast. He picks me up in my hotel, and I had a rental car. I think I must have spent about $75 of his money. It was a really expensive place. And he's making me think that he's this millionaire. So he gives me this paper of he wanted me to build him like a domain name registrar that he was going to sell 1,000 domains that he bought from GoDaddy. So okay, cool. I'm thinking, what am I going to charge him? Right away, he says, but I got to tell you, money is an issue. And my heart sank. And I knew right away that I was not going to be doing business with him. And that was the last time I was going to talk to him. And that was what happened. And we were talking back and forth for like 30 days after that. But I kind of just, sometimes you just fade away from somebody purposefully. You don't respond to them to the point where
Hmm.
you just don't respond to them ever. And that's what happened. But it was interesting how he liked my presentation enough to want to at least BS me and show me around. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then we had a good time. I won't lie about that, but I happen to think that St. Louis is a really cool city, and I think everybody should visit it at least once. And it's cool. But I want to ask you, so the Fallible Man, have you ever watched The Man Show?
Is that a TV thing?
Yeah. Oh, you never heard of
No,
The Man
no.
Show?
I've heard the name, but
Oh.
I don't watch a whole lot of television.
Oh, it was actually started by Jimmy Kimmel before he was a talk show host, what he is now. What I'm going to
Hmm.
do is I am going to show this to you quickly, and I have it up here. So this is the Man Show. It was on. I forgot the T. I've got this channel. It was on a cable channel. Oh, Comedy Central. I think it was on Spike also. If you know Spike TV.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla, who is also a huge podcaster, they were the original hosts. And I didn't even know Joe Rogan was even a host. So, and he's obviously the biggest podcaster in the world right now. But yeah, this was a really cool show because it was literally for men, and no woman could even enjoy it. Like that's how it was like, oh, you're a male chauvinist pig. That's what the show is about. It's like, you know, everybody in the audience, they give free beer to all the guys, and
Hmm.
they would say, what is it? Zigga, 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 hoy, hoy, hoy. They would do that 3 times. They would hold the beer up, the mug. It was an interesting thing. And it was interesting to see Jimmy Kimmel, a lot more wild of a man than he is now as he's doing his talk show. So that was kind of his start. But I think before he started. I mean, he should be a podcaster. Um,
I don't know. Jimmy needs writers.
yeah, he does. But before he started with the Man Show, I believe a he was also a co-host for Win Ben Stein's Money. And Ben Stein is a lawyer, but he's an actor. He's the guy. You ever see Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Yeah, yeah.
He was a teacher that went Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. Remember him?
I remember that show, the Win Ben Science Money. I never watched it. I
Yeah,
just remember the titles.
yeah.
I
He
remember a
must.
lot of like titles growing up
Yeah.
on shows that my parents didn't watch necessarily, and my family like. I tell you, my dad was a preacher, so my dad controlled the television.
Oh,
Um, he was more open to some things like cop shows and stuff that you wouldn't expect, but some of the comedy shows just rubbed him wrong.
really? I guess being a preacher, he probably saw things differently than somebody that was not, or
Right.
not in a religious or not like a clergyman type of role. I could see that. I mean, a lot of sitcoms are very raunchy.
Mm-hmm.
They're very sexual in nature, and I mean, obviously, a lot of podcasts are. So let me ask you something. If you're how do you think your father would find a lot of the comedy podcasts that are out there right now? Would he have the same reaction that he did in TV?
You know, I'm my dad uh, passed away about a year and a half, 2 years into this project for me,
Sorry to hear that.
and we got an extra 5 years with him after a major heart incident. So we were living on borrowed time. God was good to us on it, but
It's good.
he enjoyed watching us. I started podcasting, but he had
Wow.
never heard of podcasts at that point. But I mean, I don't listen to a lot of comedy podcasts just because I don't appreciate the humor. And so
Yeah, I get it.
I'm guessing that, but I have a weird sense of humor. Like I have a really weird sense of humor. I'm ex-military. I grew up with military friends, military family. My brothers are all military. And so I had that very dark military, like soldiers think is funny and everybody else looks at you like there's something wrong with you kind of
Hmm.
humor. And so most of the comedy shows don't hit me well. I'm like, I don't think that's funny. And
Yeah.
definitely a lot of them lean into the sex stuff a lot more and are a lot more raunchy humor. Like, yeah, I grew up in the brightest time when like Dennis Leary and Adam Sandler were doing just amazing comedy things.
Yeah.
My dad hated those. Like
Oh
I
wow.
didn't listen to them around my dad. Right, Dennis Leary, the early Adam Sandler, all of that was just off. Like my dad never would have listened to that. He didn't know I
Wow.
listened to that. So I used to listen to a lot of stuff like that. That they actually like had comedic timing with it. It wasn't just raunch for raunch sake all the time.
Hmm.
Um, but you go through phases in life, right? So I don't
You
think
do,
my
yeah.
dad would appreciate most of them. I appreciate different comedy now than I did, say, 20 years ago, which
Yeah.
feels really funny to say that I'm old enough to say that these days. But
No, we change, right? I mean, there's different types of comedy out there. You can't like them all. Maybe you
well,
can,
I
but
see things differently now because I've got two younger daughters.
yeah.
Like they changed a lot as far as like even sitcoms. You were saying, a lot of sitcoms are very sexual. I love The Big Bang Theory. I watched it for years and years and years, and like it didn't even register when they like I didn't hear it until my daughters got old enough to watch it with me,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, now I got to explain that, right? I
Oh,
started hearing
yeah.
all these like it is just laden with sex jokes. I'm like, I got to scratch one off the list or something, or start explaining things to my kids I don't want to yet.
Hello. Yeah, well
So,
that's Chuck Lorre. Chuck Lorre he has a weird sense of humor.
yeah.
So he I'm a big Two and a Half Men fan. So along the same lines as a Big Bang Theory without all the geeky stuff, from the Big
Hmm.
Bang Theory. But who's your favorite character on that show?
On the Big Bang Theory, you know, I well, the guy in me says Penny because the actress is very attractive. Um, but I liked Leonard because always felt like he was caught in the middle. He was the
Between
less
Sheldon.
nerdy of the nerdy.
Yeah.
I actually started watching it because one of my nieces is deep on the autism spectrum, and like I understood Sheldon. Hold on, I lost you for that.
What was that?
Okay, I lost you for a second.
No.
I identify with her with Sheldon, like the sense of humor and the way she translates the world. So
Yeah,
for me, it was
Sheldon
like,
was funny.
I get it.
Every every sitcom has a character like Sheldon. Not exactly Sheldon himself or that type of person, but it's somebody who always stands out that makes it who basically makes the sitcom, it takes it to a level without it being boring, right? For me, I was a big Seinfeld fan. That was always Kramer because Kramer is kind of like Sheldon in a way where they don't like to see the world like everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
And Sheldon always thought differently than everybody else. He was obviously very centric at times and egotistical, and he never admitted when he was wrong. It was funny because that would be Kramer on Seinfeld, and I just thought that was funny too. And everybody's just funny. Yeah, every I think every sitcom is like that. They have somebody, they have some sexual innuendo, and some parts that make you funny, and some that make you just scratch your head and like, what what are they saying? Like, why do they even write that? But that's the way it is, and we accept it the way. I mean, there are some podcasts. I was listening to The Onion, which was a very big one back in 2006, and they were just all they did was rant and rave about stuff.
Yeah,
So it seems like podcasts come in all types of flavors and different people. And I think that people get into podcasting because they want to. I think I told you this on your show. They want to be broadcasters.
mm-hmm.
And I know so many people that they can make good podcasters, but they have no idea what podcasting is. And that's the funny part. Like I have a sort of a brother-in-law, kind of my sister's brother-in-law, kind of. I know. He keeps talking about the Yankees. He's a Yankee fan, okay? And I'm like, Kevin, you need to be a podcaster. My cousin, who just passed away, was a really big New York Islanders fan. He lived in Long Island, and I, I said, you you need your own podcast. And at one point, I did try to turn him into a podcaster. Didn't quite work out, but it was. I think that this is what I say. I say everybody's a podcaster, but some of us speak through a mic.
I think everybody has that potential,
Yeah.
right? Everybody has that. It's one of the really fun things when you interact with people all the time, right? Is they have that that thing, and it might be a subject, it might be a specific ideology, or I've got a friend of mine who loves gaming, right? Like not computer games, like die hard board gamer, right? This was a Magic the Gathering, D&D, but he also plays like games that make Risk look like child's play. He doesn't consider
Well,
Monopoly a worthwhile game because it's a linear path to winning. He doesn't like any game that has a linear path to win.
oh wow.
And so like we play, like, I play board games with him on a regular basis. Uh, and we have this group of guys that plays, and they're very just like games most people have never even heard of, right? But if you get him talking, like he literally he's a teacher. He also runs a after school gaming, like board game meetup for the kids of this high school. Uh, but he can talk for hours. Like I thought I
Wow.
was nerdy, but you find everybody has that thing they're nerdy about, right? I've known guys who could argue, literally argue the dot builds on GPUs, like they could debate it for hours with other
Well,
guys. And it's like, wow, right? So everybody has that thing that's just, it hits them and they just open up and they brighten up. And it's like,
yeah.
yes, that's it right there. That's what
Everybody
we,
has they have their passion, and once you open that up in their mind, they can just go on for hours. I get it, you know. Now, one thing about your friend, you said that Monopoly is linear, and he
mm-hmm.
doesn't like Monopoly. And I got Shari here. Sha She hates Monopoly. So what Shari hates even more than Monopoly is Monopoly Cheaters Edition. Have you seen that game?
I haven't played it. I've seen it.
We bought it. We played it
Yeah, how's
once.
that?
We played it once. She won't play it again. But it's you actually were pretty good. You were really. She was really good. So you it's Monopoly. It's a little bit different than Monopoly. It's not just like you can actually cheat, and you draw five cards and it tells you how to cheat. Now the cheating could be, I think it's like 20 different ways to cheat. You could steal somebody's house. Actually, no. This sorry. Monopoly's Cheater Edition has no houses. They only have hotels. What? Yeah, you can steal a property card, you can steal money, and it comes with a little set of handcuffs, with a cute little plastic, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
use it. And if you get caught cheating, you go to jail. If you don't get caught cheating, you still have to tell the person I cheated, but then they get penalized for not catching you. It's kind of interesting. And she was coming to me and she was like giving me a hug. And as she was giving me a hug, her hand went on my $100 bill and
Mm-hmm.
she went back to her side and she said, I cheated. I took your $100 bill. You're like, what? And I was like, I suck at this. I can't cheat at all. And then I'm like, no, I know I cheated, but I cheated later. Like when I finally wised up. So she was coming over. She was taking all, I think you could take the person's token and put it on a different space. So it's not really linear. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it was interesting. So maybe one day you can play it with me again. I'll play with somebody else. But I want to talk to you, Brent, about procrastination and overcoming procrastination. I
Okay.
what? When today? She's a therapist. So yeah, I think you did tell me that. He actually had his latest podcast episode was about overcoming procrastination. I should bring Shari. Shari, you want to come on here? Oh, no. She's not camera shy. So talk to me about that episode, Brent.
Uh, I one of my biggest pet peeves is there are so many great ideas that have never got off a napkin, right? And I say
Mm.
napkin because I always remember the story, right? J.K. Rowling wrote the first part of the first Harry Potter on napkins or something, right? So many ideas never even get started. So many possibilities never start. And it's because most people can't get past the starting line, right? When the rubber finally meets the road, they're like, no, no, I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to take that risk. I'm not going to. In the episode, we cover like I did the research for the show because obviously I'm not a psychiatrist, right? So I did some research into the psychology of what holds up on that. But it is I get so frustrated because I know so many men that have so much incredible potential, so much to give the world, and they just like really like when it comes time, they're just like ah, right. And I used to be that guy. I remember I took a job after my wife and I got married, and we ended up moving across the country to take this job. And I was there for 2 years, and I hated the job, absolutely hated the job. But I was afraid to leave. It was security. It was job, right? It was security. I had a steady paycheck. I had somewhere to go every day, right? I had benefits, and I was terrified to step away from it. And I ended up getting fired over some nonsense.
Oh, that happens.
But yeah, and right, totally like I actually got into an argument with my manager over him firing me. He was like, "That is the stupidest nonsense you've ever said." He's like, "You got twice as many mistakes as anybody else." I said, "Yeah, it's because I pulled twice as many orders as anybody else. That's the natural. Did you pull those numbers? Well, no, that's not relevant. Yeah, it's relevant. But I digress. But I was getting fired. It's the first time I had ever been fired,
Well,
and
how'd
so I'm
that
like,
feel?
I'm freaking out, right? Because it's like, what am I going to tell my wife? I'm terrified of going home. And but I looked him square in the eye. I was like, you know what? Thank you. He said, what? I said, thank you. I said, I have been too afraid to quit. I hate it here. I look at the people who have been here for 15, 20 years and their eyes are lifeless. And I don't ever want to be that. And I've
No,
been terrified to leave the security. And it kind of so it forced me out, right?
he did you a
But I
favor pretty much.
realized, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I said, I thanked him for it because I never would have had the courage to put on my own. I was a 22 years old, been married a whole year maybe at that or 2 years at that point. And so it was like, we're in the top ramen and hot dog phase of marriage and young marriage. And it's like I never would have quit. And I learned something that day. It's like, man, I didn't know where I wanted to go with things yet, but I knew I never wanted to feel like that again, where I was just afraid to step out into something I thought was a better idea. And so over the years, right, and that's 20 years ago now, over the years, that's something that's gone with me is it takes, so I'm a total movie nerd. I have a lot of movie quotes. And one of the best lines out of any movie ever, there was a Matt Damon film called We Bought a Zoo. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I never heard of that.
It's got, it's got Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson. It's based on a true story about a single father, a widowed father who bought a zoo by accident, kind of, and it was on the brink of closure. He was just trying to get his kids out of the city and give them a new start since their mom had died. Whatever, you
Nope, I'm here. I'm listening.
and
I was muted.
and and so he accidentally bought the zoo, right? But in that movie, he shares with his son who's got a crush on a girl for the first time. He's like, it only takes 10 seconds of ridiculous courage to do anything.
That's true.
He said 100, like absolutely anything. You need 10 seconds of undiluted, unfiltered, just ridiculously insane courage, and you can do anything. And so that concept has just stuck with me on top of this. Like, I don't ever want to feel trapped again. And throughout my life, that's just built. And so many men don't start. So many women don't start. As you said, I talk predominantly to men, but I do have about, I think, 15%, 20% of my listeners are all women. So many people are so terrified to get out of their comfort zone and start.
Well, I mean,
And you
that's the
lose
thing.
most
It's
people
a
there,
comfort zone, It's like that's what they have. So,
right? You lose
yeah.
most people right there. And then you start getting into procrastination after that. So the episode ideally started with focusing on starting, just actually taking the first steps, and then followed into once you start, here's the reasons you tend to procrastinate. So identify which one of those that is,
What were the
and then you can make a
reasons?
plan around that. For a lot of people, there's a fear of failure, right? It's obviously a security thing, it's fear of failure. For some people, it's a dopamine issue, really, because you actually
Yeah.
get little dopamine hits in your brain during planning. So you start getting lost in the planning, and it feels like you're doing something, but you're not taking a lot of risk. And so your brain is going, I'm happy. I'm getting these happy signals because I'm doing something positive and it feels like I'm doing something.
Hmm.
And so you never get out of that because there's no risk and absolute reward. Then other people just get lost in the paralysis by analysis. right? They start thinking, oh, it's this, right? I can never get bigger than this. And they just get lost in the sea of all the information out there.
Yeah, that's
And then
okay. I'm sorry.
and then there are the people who literally just back themselves into a corner. They take, and I think I used the example of you've got to write a paragraph, but you're turning it into the next great American novel,
Right.
right? You keep blowing this up in your head, blowing this up in your head, and you make it so big that you can't possibly win. And you get stuck in, and that's another form of procrastination is this is too epic. This is too daunting of a task when really you're making, mountains out of molehills.
No, that happens to me a lot. No, I'm not a very big procrastinator. I mean, I think we all procrastinate. Sometimes we get lazy, sometimes we there are other reasons, but that happens to me. So I think I have to do this task. And in my head, it's a big task, but it might not be. And when I tell myself to get over the hump, and this has been happening often, is I say, this doesn't have to get done today. And that gets me going. See, I think procrastination also, at least some people are like me. I think that procrastination comes from the fact that you think it's a big, daunting task, like you just said. And you don't want to get started because the person thinks that that daunting task has to get done right now and has to be finished right now. And that's what goes through my mind. So when I want to get started, I just tell myself, as a matter of fact, your other episode was about overcoming, or sorry, reaching your goals, achieving your goals. And you said break it down into smaller pieces. Now, you, what? Yeah, right. Right. So you make it a smaller task, which what Shari said, and you you get that one task done. And that's what I do. But then you find that if you're successful with that small task, you move on to the next task. You're like, oh, I did so well. And now before you know it, you've done like five of these mini tasks. And before you know it, you're done with the whole thing. You're like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So that
I
that's
have
how
a
I do it.
I have a background in project management, so that's a go-to solution for me. That's just the automatic. That's how I approach every task.
That's the
And
agile,
so,
right? Scrum, agile, project management.
yeah, I think it's agile, but yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I've done agile project management too, so I could talk with you about that another time. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like people expect things of you, especially in a company, and you can't get it all done for what the customer expects, but you want to manage expectations. So you have to say, nope, I can only get these done this week, or as we say in Agile, we add points to it. And we use the Fibonacci system. I won't get geeky about that. Like you said, people get geeky about stuff, but but yeah, I used to do that. So I get it. But personally, I don't do that. Like personally, I just say, okay, let me just make the first step. I don't care if I finish the task. I just want to finish the first step to get me to the end of the task. And then, like I said before, that task takes me like a minute or two. Why don't I just start doing it again? I'll do the next task. I'll do the next one. And before I know it, I'm like, I didn't procrastinate. Wow. That's what happens.
But that's one of the reasons I love that line from that movie is 10 seconds of insane courage.
Yeah.
So I have a background in personal training as well, and I've always been a gym guy. I love lifting weights. I'm one of those sick people who truly just enjoy like making it harder and harder for myself. But I mean, I have those days just like everybody else where I didn't want to go to the gym, right?
Yeah.
If you will go and start, get through the first 3 sets of anything, you're going to find out the day's not so bad and you're actually enjoying the workout, right? It's
That's
that
what I do.
failure to launch issue, right? It's that failure to start. And if we can just actually start some forward motion, then momentum starts to kick in. And
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, I'm not much of a workout person, but I do a lot of jogging. And I've never run a marathon or a half marathon, but now I decided I want to. So when the weather gets nicer, because it's freezing cold here on the East Coast, I am going to do 6 miles someday in the probably I would say when the weather gets warmer. And no, I'm not procrastinating. It will be someday. uh, we know what someday means to most people. No, someday when it gets warmer, probably like March, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do it, and I already have the map. I already have the route mapped out. I'm just
Mhm.
gonna jog 4 or 6 miles and jog back. I've done it before. I just never really did it on a normal schedule. And I'm gonna get that half marathon. Just keep on doing it. I'll see when the next one is. And maybe one day I'll work my way up to the marathon. No, I'm not gonna procrastinate. It's definitely a goal of mine. I want to do it once. Um, One of my friends who I had a band with, like I don't know, 25 years ago, he was my drummer. He did the marathon with his father and his grandfather, and his grandfather couldn't walk. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. He did 27 miles not being able to walk. I don't get that at all, but it took them the longest out of everybody, like hundreds of people in the marathon or thousands, I don't even know. And they did it. They finished. I couldn't believe it. I was like, congratulations. No, you did great, but that's excellent. But what I do want to do, Brett, is as I said before, I don't. What you do with your podcast is when you have guests come on, you give them the questions. I answer the questions, no problem, and you have the answers ready to go. With me, I'm a little bit more on the spontaneous side, but the questions do come as we move along. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not one of those planners type of people. I used to plan. I like the idea of planning. I always think planning is a good thing, but it never goes well for me anyway. So for me, it's more about being spontaneous and asking whatever comes up, and that's what we did. And to me, it's more fun that way. Everybody's different. But I do I do like a lot of I like I'll say it again. I want people to check out the Fallable Man podcast because Brent is one of the most positive, uplifting podcasters I know, I met, and he's just a great you're a great podcast guest and a great podcaster. 340 episodes in, people. He's on the World Podcast Network. Check it out. Which, by the way, we're actually moving the website, so we're doing a little maintenance now. Um, and really, that's about it. So, Brent, I want to ask you how people can contact you and what your favorite podcast platform is where people can find your show.
Oh, well, my favorite podcast platform is yours. I love the World Podcast
Thank
Network
you.
because it's a nice marriage of podcasters actually being able to interact somewhat with their audience, which you just don't get
Yeah.
anywhere else. So I love the World Podcast Network. That's one of my shows there.
Thank you.
Uh, so best platform there. Best way to connect with me is you can find my newsletter, go over to the fallablemanpodcast.com, my podcast website, and there's a sign up for my newsletter, and that is really my most intimate connections with my audience. Is I do a bi-weekly newsletter.
There you go. Bi-weekly newsletter, Fallible Man. I'm sorry, FallibleManPodcast.com. There
Yep.
you go. He's also on Apple because I'm looking at it now. And let me just actually, while I'm at it, let me just share the screen real fast and show people some of your episodes that I've been talking about. Let me go ahead and do that. And here we are. So, just to show people how positive Brent is, you guys stop thinking, a man's guide to overcoming procrastination, personal development. I've listened to a lot of these podcast episodes, not all of them, but the ones that again resonate with me. The art of long-term goal achievement. I love that. Crafting a thriving marriage every day. Again, like I said, this podcast is about being a successful husband, successful father, and just a successful man in general. And scrolling down, I forgot all of these because I listen to so many a day. But parenting beyond labels, yeah, I had to struggle with that for years. Navigating life's curveballs. I don't think I've listened to that one. So I'm going to go back and put that one in my list. And it just goes on. So You can find him on Apple, as I am on right now, and also fallablemanpodcast.com, and of course the World Podcast Network. So, Brent, thank you very much for coming on. I'm very happy to have you here. And let me just stop sharing the screen. And anything else you want to say?
No, I appreciate you being on, having me on, Bruce. Like I said, I found you in the World Podcast Network early in my podcasting journey, and it was one of the great things that happened because we've built this connection now, and
Yeah,
uh, I found this great platform. Like I didn't even know what podcast network was when I joined your podcast network. So it's been a
thank you.
great journey, and I look forward to continuing that.
All right. We're always building and improving it, as you know, and we got this new thing coming up called the episode wall, which I'll tell you about another time. And really, that's about it. So you have a good one, Brent, and it was great having you on, and we'll talk very soon.
All right, thanks, Bruce.
Okay, sir. Bye bye.